you see that room? The one at the end with the light on? You were supposed to be in there 20 minutes ago. I've been covering for you again.
I just came off a double, Mia. I grabbed coffee and checked orders. I didn't realize they moved
Well,
the console.
realize it now. He's crashing an
Imagine being invisible in the one place where your expertise could save lives. Dr. Marcus Williams stood in that hospital corridor, stethoscope around his neck, medical degree from Johns Hopkins behind his name, and 10 years of surgical experience in his hands. But all the nurse saw was his skin color. She pointed down the hallway, her voice sharp with authority, shouting orders like he was there to empty trash cans, not save lives. He tried to explain. She wouldn't listen. And then 20 minutes later, the overhead speaker crackled with an emergency code. A patient was dying on the operating table. The hospital needed their best cardiothoracic surgeon immediately. They needed Dr. Marcus Williams, the same man they'd just mistaken for a janitor.
Dr. Marcus Williams had always been a morning person. Even after a grueling 12-hour shift, he found solace in the quiet hours before dawn, when St. Catherine's Medical Center hummed with the gentle rhythm of healing rather than the chaos of emergency. This particular Tuesday started like any other. Marcus arrived at 5:47 a.m., his coffee still steaming in the cardboard sleeve, his leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder, containing the medical journals he'd been studying about a new minimally invasive cardiac procedure. At 36 years old, Marcus had built his reputation methodically, deliberately. Every surgery, every consultation, every interaction with a patient's family was handled with the precision and care that had earned him respect among those who knew him. He'd grown up in Atlanta, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts as a nursing assistant, watching her come home exhausted but always finding time to quiz him on his homework. "Excellence isn't optional for us," she'd tell him, her voice tired but unwavering. "We have to be twice as good to get half the credit." He'd carried those words through undergraduate biology at Morehouse, through the endless nights of medical school at Johns Hopkins, through his residency at Massachusetts General Hospital, where he'd been one of only 3 black surgical residents in his year. The statistics haunted him. Just 5% of active physicians in America were black men. He knew what it meant to be a statistical anomaly, to walk into rooms where people's faces registered surprise before they registered respect. But Marcus had learned to navigate these spaces. He kept his head down, let his work speak for itself, and found community among the handful of other physicians of color at St. Catherine's. Dr. Aisha Patel, an emergency medicine physician, had become one of his closest friends. "You ever get tired of it?" she'd asked him once over lunch in the physician's lounge. "The second glances, the way patients sometimes ask if they can see a real doctor?" Marcus had shrugged, stirring sugar into his tea. "Every single day. But then I remember, every patient I save, every young medical student I mentor, every time I walk into that OR and do what I do best, I'm changing the narrative, even if it's just one person at a time." Today should have been a good day. Marcus had a relatively light schedule: morning rounds, a consultation on a post-operative patient, and an afternoon procedure that was routine enough to allow his mind to wander to dinner plans. His girlfriend Simone had been texting him about trying that new Ethiopian restaurant downtown. Normal life, simple pleasures. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor, nodding at the overnight security guard who was ending his shift. The cardiac wing was his domain, the place where he felt most himself, where the complexity of the human heart, both literal and metaphorical, made sense under his trained hands and focused mind. But as Marcus stepped off the elevator, his pager still clipped to his belt, his hospital ID badge clearly visible around his neck, he didn't notice the woman approaching from the nurse's station. Charge nurse Jennifer Holloway had been at St. Catherine's for 15 years, long enough to develop firm opinions about how things should run and who belonged where. She'd had a rough morning. 2 call-ins meant the floor was understaffed, a patient in 312 had been buzzing every 10 minutes, and maintenance had promised to fix the broken supply cart 3 days ago. When she saw a tall black man in scrubs walking down her hallway carrying a bag and coffee, she made an assumption. A quick, reflexive, devastating assumption that would set in motion a chain of events exposing the invisible barriers that men like Marcus faced every single day, no matter how many degrees they earned or lives they saved. Marcus checked his watch. 5:52 a.m. His first patient rounds began at 6. He had 8 minutes to drop his bag in his office, review the overnight notes, and prepare for the day ahead. He had no idea those 8 minutes would change everything.
"Excuse me?" The voice cut through the quiet hallway like a blade. Marcus turned, coffee cup pausing halfway to his lips, to see a blonde woman in scrubs striding toward him with the unmistakable energy of someone used to being obeyed. Her face was flushed, her tablet clutched in one hand like a weapon. "Yes?" Marcus replied, his tone professional, slightly questioning. Jennifer didn't break stride. She stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough that he could see the fatigue in her eyes, the tension in her jaw. "The floor on the East Wing needs to be mopped. There was a spill near the elevator about 20 minutes ago. And after that, we need someone to empty the trash in rooms 304 through 312. The day crew is running behind." For a moment, Marcus didn't understand. His brain literally couldn't process what she was saying because the context made no sense. Then it hit him. The realization came not as shock, but as a familiar, sickening weight in his stomach. The same feeling he'd had when he was 17 and a police officer had pulled him over for driving suspiciously in his own neighborhood. The same feeling from his first day of medical school when a professor had asked if he was looking for the building services office. "I'm sorry," Marcus said carefully, his voice steady, despite the anger beginning to coil in his chest. "I'm Dr. Williams. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon here. My office is in the surgical wing." "Look," Jennifer interrupted, her tone sharpening with impatience. She gestured with her tablet, pointing down the hallway. "I don't have time for this. The day shift starts in an hour and this whore needs to be clean. Environmental services should have handled this already, but since you're here..." "I'm not environmental services." Marcus spoke louder now, firm enough to cut through her assumptions. He held up his badge, the hospital ID that clearly stated his name, his title, his photograph. "I'm Dr. Marcus Williams, MD, cardiothoracic surgery. I work in cardiac surgery. I have patient rounds starting in..." He checked his watch. "6 minutes." Jennifer's eyes flicked to the badge, but instead of the immediate recognition and apology Marcus expected, he saw something worse. Doubt. She squinted at the ID as if it might be fake, as if the letters spelling out Marcus Williams, MD, cardiothoracic surgery, might rearrange themselves into something that made more sense to her worldview. "Where did you get that badge?" she asked, her voice dropping into suspicion. The question hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, felt the careful professional mask he'd cultivated over years beginning to crack. "I got it from hospital administration when I was hired 3 years ago. The same place every physician gets their credentials." A passing resident, Dr. Chen, a second year who'd rotated through Marcus's service last month, slowed down, catching the tension in the exchange. Marcus saw him hesitate, saw the conflict play out on his face, get involved or walk on. Dr. Chen kept walking. Marcus didn't blame him. He'd been there too, earlier in his career, watching awkward confrontations and telling himself it wasn't his place to intervene. Jennifer crossed her arms, her body language radiating disbelief and something else, defensiveness. "I've worked on this floor for 15 years and I've never seen you before. I work primarily in the OR and the ICU. My office is in the surgical wing, but I do rounds here regularly for post-op cardiac patients. I have 3 patients on this floor right now who..." "Then where's your white coat?" Jennifer demanded, seizing on this as if it were definitive proof. "All the doctors wear white coats on rounds." He gestured to his scrubs, the same standard blue scrubs worn by physicians, nurses, technicians, and yes, environmental services staff throughout the hospital. "I just came from the gym. I keep a change of clothes in my office. My white coat is..." I stopped himself. The absurdity of having to justify his clothing choices suddenly overwhelming. "Why am I explaining this? Call the surgical department. Call Dr. Rashad, the chief of surgery. He'll verify."
I'm not calling anyone at 6 in the morning because someone is walking around claiming to be a doctor. Jennifer's voice rose, her frustration matching his. Other staff members were slowing down now, watching. Marcus could feel their eyes, could sense the familiar dynamic taking shape, a black man and a white woman in conflict, and everyone knew how these situations typically played out, who typically got believed, who typically got security called on them. Marcus took a deliberate breath, forcing his voice into the calm, measured tone he used with anxious patients' families. Nurse Holloway, I understand you're having a difficult morning, but I need to get to my office, prepare for rounds, and check on my patients. If you have concerns about my credentials, I'm happy to have you walk with me to the surgical department where we can clear this up, but I am not going to stand here and... I need to see your hospital ID, Jennifer interrupted again, reaching for the badge hanging around his neck. Marcus stepped back instinctively, his hand moving to protect the badge. The gesture was defensive, protective of his personal space, but he knew immediately how it would look. A nurse requesting identification, a man backing away. The optics were terrible. Do not touch me, Marcus said quietly, but with absolute firmness. And do not touch my badge. You can look at it from where you're standing. My name is Dr. Marcus Williams. My medical license number is displayed. My department is listed. Everything you need to verify my identity is right there. Their standoff had attracted a small audience now. 2 nurses from the station were watching openly. A patient transporter had stopped his gurney to observe. An older black woman in a hospital gown. Mrs. Patterson from room 308, Marcus recognized her. She'd had a valve replacement 6 days ago and was doing beautifully. Stood in her doorway, her face tight with anger on his behalf. "That's Dr. Williams!" she called out, her voice weak but indignant. "He saved my life! What is wrong with you?" Jennifer's face flushed deeper, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. "Ma'am, return to your room. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me when you're harassing my doctor," Mrs. Patterson shot back. The situation was spiraling, each moment making it worse, and Marcus knew from experience that the longer this went on, the more likely it was that hospital security would be called, that he would be the one questioned, detained, asked to prove he belonged in the very building where he'd performed over 300 successful surgeries. He was about to suggest, again, that they simply walked to the surgical department together when the overhead speaker crackled to life. "Code Blue, OR3. Code Blue, OR3, requesting Dr. Williams to OR3 immediately. Cardiac emergency, requesting Dr. Williams, stat." The voice was urgent, stressed. His pager exploded with the same message. Then his phone started ringing. His body responded before his mind fully processed, adrenaline surging, training kicking in, every other consideration falling away in the face of someone's life hanging in the balance. He looked at Jennifer, whose face had gone pale, the tablet slipping slightly in her grip. "That's me," Marcus said quietly. "The doctor you were looking for is the doctor you've been refusing to believe exists. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a patient dying in the OR who needs the janitor you were shouting at to come save their life." He didn't wait for her response. He turned and ran.
Marcus's sneakers pounded against the polished hospital floors, his mind already shifting into emergency mode even as his hands trembled slightly from the rage and humiliation still coursing through his veins. He couldn't afford to think about the confrontation now. Someone was dying. That was the only thing that mattered. He crashed through the surgical wing doors, barely registering the startled looks from staff who'd never seen the composed Dr. Williams in such a state. At the OR prep area, Dr. Aisha Patel was waiting, already in surgical scrubs, her face grim. "Marcus, thank God! It's a 72-year-old patient, Mr. Richard Holloway." Marcus froze mid-step, his hands pausing over the surgical sink. "Holloway?" "Yes, Jennifer Holloway's father. She's the one who demanded we find you specifically. He's bleeding out from a failed valve replacement that another surgeon started. The team couldn't control it. You're the only one with enough experience to... Marcus, what's wrong?" The irony crashed over him like a wave of ice water. The same woman who'd refused to believe he was a doctor 15 minutes ago was now demanding he save her father's life. The same woman who'd seen him as nothing more than a janitor was now pinning all her desperate hopes on his expertise. "Nothing," Marcus said, his voice hollow. "How bad is it?" "Bad. He's lost a lot of blood. Dr. Chen tried to repair the valve, but there was an unexpected tear in the aortic root. BP is dropping. Marcus, if you can't stabilize him in the next few minutes—" She didn't need to finish. Marcus understood. He scrubbed in with mechanical precision, his mind compartmentalizing with the skill that came from years of training. Personal feelings went into one box. Professional duty went into another. The oath he'd taken to do no harm, to treat every patient regardless of who they were, went into a third box that overrode everything else. But as he stepped into OR3, as his eyes took in the chaos of the surgical field, the exposed heart, the blood, the frantic expressions of the surgical team, something inside him wanted to scream, to walk out, to let them feel what it was like to be dismissed, to be invisible, to have your expertise questioned and your dignity stripped away. Dr. Chen stepped back from the table, his gloves covered in blood, his eyes filled with relief and shame. "Dr. Williams, I'm sorry, I couldn't—" "Talk me through what happened," Marcus interrupted, his voice steady and clinical as he stepped up to the table. No time for emotions, no time for anything except the failing heart in front of him. As Dr. Chen explained the cascade of complications, Marcus's trained eyes assessed the damage. It was worse than he had expected. The valve had been placed incorrectly, causing a tear that extended into the critical aortic tissue. Blood was pooling despite the suction. Mr. Holloway's blood pressure was 70/40 and dropping. The monitors were screaming their warnings. "Clamp," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the chaos with calm authority. His hands moved with practiced precision, instinct and expertise guiding every motion. "Suture 4-O-proline. I need better visualization. Adjust the retractor." The OR team responded instantly, their relief palpable. Dr. Williams was here. Dr. Williams would fix this. But as Marcus worked, as his hands performed the delicate choreography of cardiac repair that he had done hundreds of times, his mind couldn't fully shut out the bitter truth of the moment. He was saving the life of the father of the woman who'd humiliated him, the same family that had benefited from years of medical privilege and had never had to prove they deserved care or respect, was now dependent on the skill of the man they'd treated as invisible. His hands worked steadily, repairing the torn tissue with microscopic precision, repositioning the valve, checking each suture for integrity. The blood flow began to normalize. The monitor's alarming beeps slowed to a steady rhythm. Mr. Holloway's blood pressure stabilized at 95/60, then climbed to 110/70. "He's stabilizing," the anesthesiologist announced, the relief in her voice echoing through the OR. Marcus continued working, refusing to rush, refusing to let any emotion compromise the surgery. He repaired every millimeter of damaged tissue, reinforced the valve placement, checked and rechecked his work. It took 47 minutes of intense concentration before he finally stepped back from the table, his gloves stained with the blood of a man whose daughter had seen him as nothing more than hired help. "Close him up," Marcus said quietly to the surgical team. "Monitor him closely in ICU. I want hourly updates." He stripped off his gloves, his gown, and walked out of the OR without looking back. In the scrub room, his hands finally started shaking.
Marcus stood at the surgical sink for a long time after the surgery, watching the water run over his hands, pink with another person's blood. His reflection in the metal fixtures showed a man who looked exhausted, not from the emergency surgery, but from the weight of existing in a world that required him to prove his humanity over and over again. Dr. Patel found him there 20 minutes later. "He's stable," she said softly. "You saved his life, Marcus. Mr. Holloway is going to make it because of you." Marcus nodded but didn't speak. What was there to say? That he was glad? That he was angry? That he was tired of a system where his blackness was seen before his stethoscope? where his skin color was more visible than the medical degree that had cost him 12 years of his life and $400,000 in student loans? Jennifer is outside, Aisha continued carefully. She wants to thank you. She wants to apologize. I don't want her apology. The words came out harder than Marcus intended, but he didn't take them back. I know, but Marcus, this is bigger than just her. You know that, right? He did know. Jennifer Holloway wasn't unique. She was a symptom of a much larger disease. The unconscious bias that infected every institution, every interaction, every moment of every day for people who looked like him. The assumption that competence had a color, that authority had a specific face, that excellence couldn't exist in a black body. When Marcus finally emerged from the surgical wing, still in his scrubs, Jennifer was waiting in the hallway outside the ICU. Her eyes were red from crying, her face pale with the terror of almost losing her father. When she saw Marcus, she stood up so quickly that she nearly stumbled. "Dr. Williams, Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. Because I couldn't see past my father would have died if you hadn't—" The words tumbled out incoherently, thick with shame and gratitude, and the horrible realization of what her assumptions had nearly cost. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Part of him wanted to forgive her, to be the bigger person, to smooth over this uncomfortable moment so everyone could move on and forget it happened. That's what he'd been taught to do: absorb the hurt, carry the burden, make others comfortable with their own prejudice. But he was tired. So tired. Your apology doesn't undo what happened, and it doesn't address the real question. How many other people like me have you dismissed because they didn't look like your idea of what a professional should be? How many janitors? How many nursing assistants? How many environmental services workers have you treated as less than because their job title wasn't prestigious enough for your respect? Jennifer opened her mouth, but no words came out. I saved your father's life today, and I'm glad I did. Not because of you, but because that's what I took an oath to do. But I need you to understand something. When you looked at me this morning, you didn't see a doctor. You saw a black man in scrubs, and your brain made an assumption. That assumption almost killed your father. And assumptions like that, they kill opportunities. They kill dreams. They kill the spirit of people who have to fight twice as hard for half the respect. Tears streamed down Jennifer's face. What can I do? Do better, Marcus said simply. See better. When you look at someone, see them. Not their skin color, not your assumptions about what job they might have. See their humanity first. He walked away, leaving her standing there with the weight of her own bias crushing down on her shoulders. The story of what happened that morning spread through St. Catherine's Medical Center like wildfire. Some people were outraged on Marcus's behalf. Others made excuses. Jennifer was stressed. It was an honest mistake. These things happen. But something had shifted. The invisible barrier had been made visible, if only for a moment. Marcus never received a formal apology from the hospital. No policy changes were announced. But in the weeks that followed, he noticed subtle differences. Staff members he'd never met greeted him by name. More black medical students reached out, asking about his experience, seeking mentorship. And Jennifer Holloway requested a transfer to a different floor. Whether from shame or genuine desire to change, Marcus never knew. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a letter. It was from Mr. Holloway, handwritten on expensive stationery, thanking him for his life and apologizing for raising a daughter who had inherited his generation's blind spots. The letter ended with a single line that Marcus kept in his office drawer. Prejudice is a poison that hurts everyone, but it kills the person who holds it most of all.